Welcome in. We are live here on Southeastern 16, talking some SEC football. We do this on Tuesdays and Thursdays for a little while. Hey, look, spring practice, it has begun for some teams. It will start in the next 10 days or so for other teams across the SEC. And so we'll talk some spring storylines. We'll also get into the combine that was last weekend. And we spent time last Thursday talking about the combine, the draft with our guest from the Believe Network, and so we'll probably get him back on again as we move closer to the draft. But a lot going on. Jay Greeson is spring football getting set to get rolling, and the combine, busy time, but always fun. And I know you spent a lot of time watching the combine and keeping up with that last week.
I really did, and honestly, an unfair amount of time, considering that I'm a father of two and my wife is unbelievably patient. And doing what we do for a living, it is really a great excuse when you get to look up and go, I'm watching the underwear Olympics because I need to for my job. And granted, I'm a draft nut, so I love the draft and I love everything associated with it. But when you get to throw that out there, yeah, I'm watching a midweek LSU Mississippi State softball game for my job. I mean, it's better than most, but
it is.
In terms of the combine, so much of it is now. I mean, it is such a production, and it is so ballyhooed, and there are so many things that are overblown. All this, like, I don't necessarily need my offensive guard to run 40 yards. If I'm counting on my offensive lineman to get 40 yards downfield to make a block and do it in 4.8 seconds, then I need to draw up better plays. This is not something you're going to diagram that I'm going to pull a guard out 40 yards. But in terms of the combine, if you're talking about wide receivers, if you're talking about corners, if you're talking arm length for your tackles, trying to keep guys from getting around the edge and pressure your quarterback, you're talking about hand size for guys who are trying to control a football in a violent environment where everybody's involved in a car crash on every play. I mean, some of these things are details that matter. And it's just fascinating on how the dominoes affect, because certainly a couple of decades ago, the Philadelphia Eagles made Mike Mamula a first-round pick off of what he did in the combine. You made him a top 10 pick, and he was a bust not that long after. But also, nobody had really heard of a guy from East Carolina named Chris Johnson who dropped in and ran a 4.24 40. The Titans took him in the first round, and he ran for 2,000 yards in a season. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in Indy. I will say that. Yeah. And I think the first guy that jumped off the screen to everybody was South Carolina safety Nicky Mariuari. And don't ask me to call him by his last name more than once, because I was gunning up for that one, and I'm certain South Carolina fans are going to hit us in the comments that how bad I missed it. But in the years they've been doing this, Chase, he graded out better than every other safety who's ever showed up. 6'3", 223, ran a 4.38 40, had a vertical jump of 44 inches, and really registered off the charts. Now, a lot of people, you're going, well, did this guy make any plays? He was the guy, if you remember, that had the pick six against LSU called back for the late block on Garrett Nussmeier in a pivotal game that was thrilling to watch, especially if you didn't have a dog in that fight. But this guy went to Indy and became really a guy at a position where athletic metrics truly matter, because you're asking a guy to be able to get in the box and tackle Saquon Barkley, to get in the slot and cover Travis Kelce, to be a free safety and potentially match up with A.J. Brown. So you're asking a guy with that kind of versatility. The only way you can truly measure that metric is through these athletics, and he was dynamic.
Yeah, and he was such a big part of South Carolina this year defensively. Like, they would have not been able to do the things that they've done without him on the field. Like, he was He was spectacular. Another guy, I want to get your thoughts on Shamar Stewart, another guy on the defensive side of the ball that seemed to have a good time up in Indy.
Well, and he was our guest last week was talking glowingly about Shamar Stewart, and it's crazy to think how bad Jimbo Fisher must have mismanaged that Texas A&M roster when, and I know the transfer portal changes everything, but this time a year ago, we'd have been talking about how Walter Nolan was this guy, and he goes to Ole Miss, and he's in a lot of first round in mock drafts. But I think everybody has been talking about Abdul Carter, the Penn State edge rusher, and Carter with the foot injury and not being able to go in Indy. I think on a lot of people's boards, Shamar Stewart may be the first defensive player not named Travis Hunter drafted.
Yeah, very well could. Who are some other guys you would say would be winners from the combine from the SEC last weekend?
Well, I kind of referenced in the first little diatribe about how speed on the perimeter is kind of a apples to apples corollary, and the SEC had two of the fastest guys measured in the 40 this weekend. Max Hairston, the corner at Kentucky, who was just he's slight in build, I think less than 180 pounds, but he turned in a combine best 4.2840 that really is going to measure up when you're over 6 feet and you can run with everybody on the field. You're going to have a place in the NFL because that speed on an island is not only needed, it's required. So, and conversely, Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden clocks a 4.29 a year after Xavier Worthy became the talk of the combine and jumped into the first round with a 40 in the 4.2s before the Chiefs then scooped him up late in round one. I think Matthew Golden, in a very weak wide receiver class, may have catapulted to the top of that position. So you're talking about three guys with the South Carolina safety, Hairston, the corner from Kentucky, and potentially Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas, who've moved into the upper echelon of their position groups really because of their physical showing in Indianapolis, which is the importance of combine. And it's especially important in an era because one other name, there are so many people who go to Indy and who are now choosing not to work out. And I get it. The quarterbacks, they want to throw with who they're comfortable with. Well, you know what? I mean, that's like saying, hey, I want to be a hitter and I want to go to the plate and I want to tell the starting pitcher for the other team, hey, I'd like a fastball here, please. You know, you're not going to get to pick and choose what environments you're going to have to play football in. So I think as a scout, you want guys to embrace the newness. Now, it can blow up in your face because Will Howard, the Ohio State quarterback, was terribly inaccurate on a lot of his throws, throwing to different guys. But I think Jackson Dart had made himself a lot of money this week, the Ole Miss quarterback, by being willing to go out there, throw, do all the various skill drills. And again, everybody knows Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, but after that, it's anybody's guess on who's going to be third. The slow kid from Louisville made himself some money, but in terms of SEC guys, I think Jackson Dart had potentially worked himself to a position of value that somebody may trade into the back half of the first round to get that third or fourth quarterback in round one. Because while it's not a great quarterback class, there are still teams that play their football games mainly on Sundays who need quarterbacks, and that position of value is going to be coveted come late April in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So the combine wrapped up. I want to kind of shift in now to some spring football, and I think quarterbacks is somewhat of a big topic when it comes to spring. So we've got some storylines that we've come up with that we're looking forward to this spring. I'll start with you, Jay. What's one storyline you're looking forward to as we get into spring football?
Well, and not to spend all my time in Oxford, Mississippi, but you're talking about a program that's going to lose a potential first-round pick at quarterback, a guy who reset some of Eli Manning's single season and career passing records with the Rebels. And I think his replacement in Austin Simmons may actually be more dynamic. I know he's more athletic, and every Ole Miss fan I know, and there are a bunch of them, for what I write on the Times Free Press website, for the folks I hang out with here and in and around Chattanooga, Tennessee, they're really quietly confident in what Austin Simmons is going to be able to do in a Lane Kiffin offense. And some of the pieces that they've put in through the portal, I'm telling you that offense, they're going to have to replace some pieces across the defensive front seven. But I think Austin Simmons is going to surprise a lot of folks and be a star in the toughest league in America.
And when you have a quarterback like that and a coach like Lane Kiffin, who is an offensive guy, and I feel like Austin Simmons' qualities is the type of quarterback that fits what Lane Kiffin likes to do with his creative style.
I completely agree with you, Chase. And I'll go a step further, because Lane Kiffin's a lot of things to different people. And I've used this reference on a couple of our shows here on Southeastern 16. But I think Lane Kiffin may be the coach of the Chad Baker Mazzara All-Stars. If he's your guy, you love it. If he's not your guy, you'll love to hate him. And that's fine, because that gives everybody an opinion, and that only helps the entertainment value of sports. But in regards to Lane, he's going to get notoriety because that's who Lane is. I mean, he's on the Twitter. His dog's got a Twitter account. I mean, we get all those things, and he brings panache wherever he goes. But know this, dude is a quarterback whisperer. And when he first got to Tennessee, he turned Jonathan Crompton into a 5-alarm fire outside of a train wreck, with an ambulance driving into it and T-boning it at full speed, into a competent quarterback that got them to a bowl game and was a fringe NFL prospect. What he's going to be able to do, and one of the ways he does that, is he maximizes those guys' skill sets. He maximized Jackson Dart's skill set. He has done that through the years at every stop. I mean, and Austin Simmons, as Michael Jordan famously said, the ceiling is the roof. So however you want to go with whatever we got going on right here, Austin Simmons is going to be a guy that Ole Miss, they may have worries coming out of spring. It ain't going to be about Austin Simmons.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. A storyline I'm looking forward to seeing is a team that does have their quarterback. Is just what's going on around them, and that's South Carolina. I feel like there's so many intriguing questions on South Carolina this year that, again, with the way spring football is now, we're probably not going to see them in a game type situation in a spring game. But I am interested in the playmakers around Lenora Sellers. Obviously, he can run the football. We saw him throw the football and consistently get better as the season went on. But who's going to be around him? Like, who are going to be the wide receivers that he can consistently go to? Who's going to be the guy he can hand the ball off to? With Rocket Sanders, who, that was Rocket Sanders last year. Like, I just feel like there's so many questions, and especially on the offensive side of the ball, they lost so many playmakers in every position. Like, who's going to step up? Who are going to be the guys that Lenora Sellers can count on? Because you have him, but who's going to be around him?
Well, and I think that's got to be job number one for Shane Beamer and crew, right? And I think a big part of it is not only just the names that you're putting atop the depth chart. I think it's making certain that Lenora Sellers is comfortable and confident with those guys in that connection. That's a great spring storyline because of that extra time of developing. They were a noticeably different team when Rocket Sanders was on the field last year. I mean, he battled some injuries, but when he was on the field, they were dynamic. So he's not going to be there. A couple of their, as you mentioned, their perimeter guys, they're going to have to replace. And the backbone of that team was the defensive front seven that's going to lose a whole lot of dudes to Sunday. So, yes. Do you feel comfortable with Lenora Sellers coming back? Absolutely, you should. And where did you have him in your QB rankings going into spring, Chase?
High. Let me flip over to that. Here in the old handy dandy notebook. I had him 3.
Yeah, I mean, and I have a hard time really arguing too much. Who were 1 and 2?
I had Lagway 2, which
no, I'm high on him too. I'm especially high on him. I mean, for God's sakes, he saved Billy Napier's job.
Yes, he did, and I almost put Lenore Sellers 2 and I went with Lagway 2, and then I had Garrett Nussmeier 1.
Okay, well, that leads me directly into my second spring training item of interest is you talked about who's going to be in a lot of positions for South Carolina. I mean, I think LSU, they're going to lose a handful of dudes to the league, but they dominated the portal like nobody else in college football. And so you're talking about a spring practice. Makes me think back. I coached a little middle school football up here in and around Chattanooga football. And during spring practice, we made certain everybody had the tape on their helmet because they're all wearing different numbers and you don't know them. But how do you identify them? Oh, hey, Johnson, hustle over here, because they got the tape on the helmet right there. LSU may have tape on their helmets this year in the spring because they got so many new faces, but they know who Garrett Nussmeier is. LSU, man, that's going to be a trendy team, preseason top 6, top 7, because of so many dudes they got from all around the country.
Yeah, I think this was an incredible offseason for Brian Kelly, and it had to be. Like he had to get some dudes in there, and he did. Like I am interested to see kind of the finished product of when they're on the field. Well,
and it also Brian Kelly really kind of initiated what I've written now this for the Times Free Press here in Chattanooga. I've dubbed it the loser's tax. When you underachieve, these coaches are now kicking in 7 figures of their own money into the NIL fund. Norvell did it at FSU. Brian Kelly did it with $1 million into the LSU initiative. I mean, these guys are ponying up checks because they underachieved in the fall to try to meet their fan base in the middle. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And I mean, in a million years, I mean, think about guys like Barry Switzer who got run out of the sport for paying players. And we just had an offseason where 2 head coaches made proclamations that they're giving $1 million to help pay their players.
It's amazing. It is amazing. A storyline I'm looking forward to seeing is at Alabama, specifically in the quarterback battle there. And Ryan Grubb, new offensive coordinator in Tuscaloosa, met with the media yesterday, and I pulled out 3 quotes that he had talking about 3 different quarterbacks. And Ty Simpson, who's been there the longest as a backup, Ryan Grubb said that Ty Simpson, and I quote, made the biggest jump from day 1 to day 2. So he liked what he saw from Ty Simpson. Grubb said about Austin Mack, who he recruited at Washington and transferred with Deboer. He said has done a really good job of showing command for a young player. And then Keelan Russell, the freshman at Alabama, Grubb said he is unflappable. Awesome job of staying the course. And so he had some really good things to say. But the way, as I was watching him have this press conference, the way he talked about Keelan Russell really stood out to me, talking about a freshman quarterback. And I think all 3 of them are really good, but you could just almost see kind of the sparkle in his eye when he was talking about him. And so I'm interested to see the quarterback battle at Alabama with Ryan Grubb, because all 3 of those guys, to me, really fit what Grubb and Deboer like to do offensively.
Okay. I know your voice is a little strained, but how old are you, Chase?
29.
Okay. You are in the media. I have almost been in the media as long as you've been on this planet. So I've been in a bunch of these news conferences. I want you to read me the first sentence about each of those quarterbacks from Ryan Grubb, and I'm going to give you my interpretation of coach speak lingo, if you will.
All right.
Ty Simpson.
Ty Simpson made the biggest jump from day 1 to day 2.
He was craptastic on day 1.
And Austin Mack has done a really good job of showing command for a young player.
Okay. We can't wait till he becomes an old player, and he may become an old player at UTC because I don't know if he's going to be able to show command down here long.
And Keelan Russell, he's unflappable. Awesome job of staying the course.
He's unflappable because I chewed his ass twice over because he made so many mistakes because he's a freshman. So I get it. This is spring. I mean, you got to understand the goods and the bads. You can look at a spring game and you go, oh my God, our team scored 62 points. And then you got to realize, oh my God, our defense gave up 62 points. That's spring. But I will say this. One of the fundamental beliefs of high school, college football, and even into the NFL, if you're going to stink young. So if all 3 of these guys are tied, give the ball to the freshman and let him go. I mean, so in my opinion, even in the portal era, you live in the state of Alabama, so you get up close and personal with Alabama and Auburn on a daily basis because that's those football teams are the pro sports in that state. I mean, I went to Auburn. I know this. So you're going to be neck deep in it all year round. You got to believe that the apex of that offense is with Kalen Russell, right? I mean, the absolute ceiling. Yeah. If this is a traditional Alabama team where you can win with Greg McElroy, and don't get me wrong, Greg McElroy is really good at what we do, and he's a really nice dude. But if you're going to be great with A.J. McCarron, because you've got future NFL dudes at 19 of the other 21 positions, then that's fine, well and good. But if you're going to need dynamic play, then I think the guy who's unflappable provides Alabama with the most excitement.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which leads me to the storyline across the state. You've got a 3-headed quarterback battle, which Auburn was an 8 or a 9 win team last year if they just had mediocre quarterback play. They got terrible quarterback play, so they missed on the postseason and only won 5 games. But they've now our buddy Jimmy Rain, the guy who owns Osmos Pressure Treated Pine, the yellow fella as he's known, and a big Auburn donor. The Auburn NIL ponied up. They got not 1 but 2 Power 5 conference quarterback transfers. Although I will say this, everybody knows about Jackson Arnold, who came from Oklahoma, and I'm certain he commanded a 7-figure NIL check to come across the SEC. Stanford transfer Ashton Daniels committed in December. But I look today, Chase, he's not listed on the Auburn roster.
Interesting.
So, I mean, I don't know, but I tried to Google him, and the last things I saw were that he committed December 16th to Auburn. And then Auburn also has what they hope is an unflappable freshman, Deuce Knight, who flipped his longtime commitment from Notre Dame to Auburn late in the last fall recruiting cycle, which I'm certain demanded checks with multiple commas in it to go from the Irish to the Tigers. But I think everybody assumes Jackson Arnold is the front runner, but I'm really excited to see what Deuce Knight does as an Auburn graduate and to see what is in a monster year for Hugh Freeze, probably the biggest decision of his coaching career.
No, I that's where I wanted to go next. I wanted to ask you, like, if you're in Hugh Freeze's seat, like this is a decision you have to get right when you choose who your starting quarterback is. Because last year he chose his guy, then went with somebody else, then went back. Like it can't happen this year. When you choose your guy, it's got to be your dude.
It absolutely has to be your dude, and it has to play out and be right. I mean, because if it doesn't, I was all for the Hugh Freeze hiring, and I'm all about second chances, and I know he's burned a lot of bridges across the league and across college football, but this is like so many other things, is a result-oriented business, and mediocrity in this league, especially at programs who have higher expectations than 7 wins being the high point, is just simply not going to cut it. So, I mean, maybe sometime next week when we talk about spring storylines, because we spent a lot of time talking about quarterbacks today, maybe we talk about which coaches have the most pressure going into spring, because I think Hugh Freeze is really high on that list.
No, I agree with you there. Another storyline I'm looking at is with the Tennessee Vols, and it's a team again, like we mentioned with South Carolina, they've got their quarterback, they've got Nico, but I look at their offensive line, they've only got one returning starter. I look at their wide receiver room, they've got one returning starter. They're losing their running back, Dylan Sampson, who was their guy this year. They've got a couple, Deshaun Bishop and Peyton Lewis, who are going to be good. But to me, I'm looking for who's going to be kind of like South Carolina. Who's going to be the guys around Nico that's going to help this team be successful this year? And I'm not sure who those are right now.
Yeah, and if we were lucky enough to have him on the platform, I'm not entirely certain Josh Heupel could tell you. I mean, he'd rattle off 4, 5, 6 different names, making certain everybody got a shout out, and be certain to talk about how much guys improved from day 1 to day 2 and how unflappable some of them are. But I don't know if there are lead pipe answers up there. And conversely to that, I think more than the talking points we had with South Carolina about Lenora Sellers, I think this is on Nico Amaliava to elevate everybody else around him. I mean, that's a guy who came in, The Athletic reported he was an $8 million NIL guy. That was the guy who came in, the number 1 quarterback in the country. That was the guy who came in, and did they make the playoffs last year? Absolutely they did. But you're not spending $8 million for a quarterback for 1 playoff trip and then regression. So, I mean, this is now, if last year he had a whole bunch of help as Tennessee got out in front of their skis a little bit, maybe they were a year ahead in the schedule type of thing. Now this has got to be, hey boys, get on board. I'm driving the bus and let's roll. I got you.
Yeah, because I feel like towards the end of last year, Nico did look much better, as in like leadership, control of the team. Like, I feel like he grew a lot in that from the start of the season, because I questioned that towards the start of last season. Like, he's got talent, but he's not in control of this team. But as he got towards the end of the year, I feel like he did, and I think he's just going to expound on that in 2025.
Well, and I think, boy, oh boy, to go back to your original one, so it's 2 great storylines, South Carolina and Tennessee, facing some similar troubles, because we talked about South Carolina was a different team when Rocket Sanders was on the field. When Tennessee got into crunch time in SEC play last year, that was Dylan Sampson's team. So, I mean, now, Nico, this has to be your team. This has to be on 3rd and 3, you're figuring this stuff out, whether you got to keep it, whether you got to throw it, whether you got to change the play at the line of scrimmage. Because last year you just turned around and handed it to the best back in the league. Now, this is you got to be a dude now.
Yeah, that's very true. And so I'm excited to see some of these storylines as we get ready for spring practice. Again, some teams going, some teams will begin in the next 10 days or so. We'll get spring practice underway. Don't expect to see any spring games on TV, Jay.
Well, it's all right. I'll either be playing college football 25 or doing more draft prep.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we got plenty to do. That'll do it for our live stream today. We will be back with you on Tuesday talking more spring football. Be looking out. We'll have some guest interviews as well coming up on the channel. So we'll have you covered with SEC football as we get into spring, summer, and get you ready for the 2025 season. But of course, we have SEC basketball and baseball content here on Southeastern 16. So subscribe if you've not already, and we will talk to you next time here on Southeastern 16.